Marshall, we're ready for you when you are. We're ready.
Okay, we'll go ahead and call the January 15th meeting of the Basin Management Committee to order. Please rise for the pledge. I don't see the flag, but we'll go that direction. Charlie, would you like to lead us, please?
Sure. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, can we go ahead and have a roll call, please?
Okay. Chairperson Ozinski.
Present.
Director Gibson.
Here.
Director Cookie.
Here.
Director Zimmer.
Here. Okay, with that then we'll move on to board member comments, which is item number 4 on the agenda. Does anybody have any comments above and beyond what's on the agenda today that we'll discuss at that time?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
we have an outstanding item that's not on the agenda about S&T's exclusion from representation on staff meetings. And I'm working through that with Dan, and I trust that you guys, as the other members of the committee, join me in the concern that S&T should have staff participation in those meetings. And I appreciate your support in that.
Okay, thank you. No other comments, so we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Yeah, so item 5 on the consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes from the December 18th, 2019 meeting, approval of the warrants, budget update, and invoice register from December 2019, and then approval of the proposal from Water Systems Consulting for professional services as the executive director for the Basin Management Committee.
Does anybody have any questions?
Go ahead.
I'll let Mark, you go first.
Regarding the minutes, I'd like to pull those out and talk about those a little bit. Just to clarify some of the conversation that we had regarding the hydraulic model and some of the figures. So it was a little bit, I don't know if I followed the minutes and somewhat agree with what was stated during the meeting, and then as we dove in and looked at the budget, what we're going to talk about further on in the meeting, it seemed to be a little bit of confusion there. So I don't know if it's something that we actually bring, we approve the minutes now and then, or if we clarify it and bring it back at the next meeting and approve them at that time. But I think we have to have a little bit more further conversation, which I believe we'll do in subsequent items on the agenda.
Okay, well, you want to pull that item and we can push it off to the end and then see if we need to address it?
Okay.
All right, so we'll pull the item 5A and we'll put that at the end of the action items. Okay, Mr. Coates.
Yeah, I had also some concerns about the meeting minutes, some omissions. And I understand also these aren't important. They are important, but we're also going through a transition now between staff members, and so some of this is understandable. So I support Mr. Zimmer, Director Zimmer.
Okay. All right, so can we take public comment on the consent agenda 5B and 5C? Okay, seeing no comments, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board for action on 5B and 5C.
Move approval of consent.
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain since I wasn't at that meeting. Oh, no, pardon me, that's the minutes part. I will agree to this, yes. So it's unanimous, 4-0. Okay, number 6 is the Executive Director's report.
All right, so item 6 is the Executive Director's Report. We've provided an update of a number of the ongoing BMC initiatives, and I'll quickly sort of walk through this, and then if there's any specific items that we want to discuss further, I can respond to questions on those. Starting off with the funding and financing programs to support basin implementation, a summary of the Prop 1 groundwater grant program, the IRWM, and the Prop 1 stormwater grant program. I have an update on the IRWM program, talking with representatives from the county that there's been a slight delay in the approval, of the IRWM grant funding that will help fund one of LOCSD's projects. I believe that's been pushed out till approval right now is pending in August of 2020, whereas they were originally targeting Q2 2020. So that may have an impact on initiating LOCSD's project. The other funding and financing item is the water recycling funding program, and this was included in the last Executive Director's report, and we will actually cover it in more detail in a later item, item 7C. So I'll skip past that. The status of Basin Plan implementation and funding plan. Very similar information from the last Executive Director's report. We have not had any additional BMC staff meetings since the last meeting, and so no new updates there. Moving on to the program updates. Just a slight update on Program U. At the last BMC meeting, the BMC have approved the authorization of the remaining funding for the soil aquifer testing to support the creek discharge program. However, those activities have not initiated, pending the outcome of the budget discussion and the discussion about the potential pursuit of a grant. We'll cover that again later. The land use and planning process update. It's still the same update from December 4th, and I believe we're still targeting Planning Commission hearings for the Los Osos Community Plan in early 2020, as well as Planning Commission hearings for the Habitat Conservation Plan in early 2020, and the accessory dwelling unit item in January of 2020. For the Los Osos wastewater project flow and connection update, the influent flows at the treatment facility averaged 0.48 mgd. In December, 693,900 gallons of recycled water was delivered to Sea Pines, and then 46.5 acre feet was delivered to Broderson for effluent disposal. The total effluent disposal for the calendar year was 555 and 65 acre feet. The enforcement continues to sit around 99.1% connection status with 47 unconnected properties. The water conservation update, I believe, is the same as the last meeting. No additional rebates were documented. And then the same update for cannabis and hemp. The pending task list for the Executive Director. The adaptive management report was presented at the last Basin Management Committee meeting and is currently available, or we're accepting comments on that report. No update on the seawater intrusion monitoring. The 8th and Elmore Urban Stormwater Recovery Project, that is on the agenda under item 7E. We'll discuss that later. And then creek discharge, again, we covered previously. The Sigma update is that on December 18th, 2019, DWR finalized the basin prioritizations. So that was the same date as our last BMC meeting. So that is an update from the last executive director's report, and that formalized the Los Osos area sub-basin and the Warden Creek sub-basins being prioritized as very low, according to DWR. So that covers the executive director's report.
Any questions?
I have a comment about the reverse osmosis systems offsets proposed by the county for cannabis agriculture applications. And I think that it's important that our committee, the Basin Management Committee, weigh in on this perhaps and make some recommendations about that to the county. For instance, for residential use, I don't think that there's any necessity for RO systems. All of the water that the 3 purveyors deliver to residential customers all qualifies by U.S. EPA standards and California clean water standards. So there's no real reason to have RO systems in individual homes. So these must be for private well owners, these RO systems, but I'd like to discuss that a little bit further.
Okay, I think I can answer your question.
Sorry, my microphone was off.
Okay, the reason that's included is because with the RO system, you're only using like 1/3 of the water.
Yes.
And that's the reason that's included. It's not a mandatory thing, but it's the alternative that they're proposing.
So it's not a matter of treating the water coming into the home,
Right.
except for the aesthetics of it, the taste of it to the user. And so these systems are inefficient. You drink a
Right.
glass of water, you put 2 down the.
Understand.
And so.
But it's not mandatory.
So if you replace that, you do get a water savings. And all of the retrofit tables are, based on studies that show what this fixture saves in the way of water as part of the stream of all water going into the house.
So would these RO system retrofits then be pressurized retrofit that would reintroduce the concentrate stream back into the cold water of the home or the hot water?
No, it would just to take out. So people people have a Brita filter that they use, or they have these RO systems, and so all it's proposing to do is reduce the waste stream. All you have to do is get the minerals and some other things out of the water to make it to the purity. But if you can do that efficiently by just taking what you need out rather than taking what you need out plus a whole bunch of diluting water and put it into the waste system, then you've lessened the amount of water that goes into producing that glass of better tasting water out of that RO system.
So is the proposal then that these offsets would eliminate RO systems?
No, just make them more efficient. It's like you've seen the systems on the sinks in houses, right?
I'm very familiar with these. I designed this kind of thing.
Might have one.
Yes.
Okay, it's just like a efficiency of a clothes washer. So
1 to 5.
It takes you can take 40 gallons, or you can do the same job in 15. This is, if you want to produce a glass of water, you can have 2 glasses of waste, or you could have 1 glass of waste. So so to get that 1 good glass of water, you're using 3 glasses, or you could be using less than 2 glasses.
From testing these RO systems in laboratory situations, I don't understand this the same way you do, the way you're describing it. And I think that this warrants some more discussion.
We can certainly get you in touch with the folks who draw up our retrofit tables.
Maybe we can do that at a staff meeting that S&T participates in.
There you go. That's it. We'll figure that out.
I think probably a one-on-one with you and the other technical people might be more productive, quite frankly. Any other comments?
Yeah, I do have one question. The delay in the IRWM funding, is that coming from the state level or the county process?
I believe that's from the state level. So the application was submitted in December, and it's the anticipated timeline for the state to review and develop awards and agreements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else?
And does that impact any of the other grant funding opportunities, the ones that we're specifically participating in? are those on schedule? I guess I'm really looking at what is the timing of what we're proposing. There's a proposal to approve some funding. Is that something that is critical based on grant funding, timing, and is there benefit to taking action now or holding off? I guess was, but we once again, I think we're diving into that a little bit later on in this meeting.
Yeah, the delay specific that I described earlier was specific to the IRWM program and will not impact this other program.
Okay. All right, so we'll go to public comment on the executive director's report. For your record, please state the name. Please state your name. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name is Pete McAdam. I'm a resident of Los Osos. Our family has owned a house and a lot next to the house since 1969. We have been unable to build on that extra lot for over 30 years. Recently, the state has passed laws mandating approval of ADUs, associated dwelling units, with few restrictions. Those laws would finally allow us to utilize the land we own by merging the lots and building an ADU for a family member to live in. But the county is poised to reject ADU applications, quote, due to the inadequacy of water supply, unquote. That's on the county website. I would ask this committee to support ADUs based on the provisions for retrofit water offsets already on the books and previously allowed in the same area for dwelling units added to existing homes. Because retrofits mandate a 2-for-1 water offset, the demand on water use is actually reduced, so the inadequacy reasoning is false. If this committee confirms that retrofits address the water supply issue, then the county would be free to accept ADU permit applications, and we would finally be able to use our land. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Lindy Owen, Los Osos. Again, I missed the very beginning of this, but I do think that we're talking about trying to find other ways to offset water usage so that we can have new growth. This idea of the cannabis farm being able to get the water supply that they need to grow the amount of hemp that they are growing out there is ludicrous, that they can get it out of an RO, reverse osmosis system. It was when they first applied, and it continues to be. I can't see whether a vehicle is going to drive around and pick up this water or the replacing systems. The other point that I'd like to make is it's getting very tiring to see that the prohibition zone cannot build houses. Outside the prohibition zone, they can. This has reached a point where I believe we need to start getting into a fairness factor about how many houses can be built a year, how large they can be, and who goes first. And I would welcome that discussion, but trying to find more offsets is, if anything, use the flume. We've lost I don't know how many hundreds of gallons this last 2 water periods through leakage. And if the water's that important, a flume system is $200. You could offset it $100 and possibly save. I mean, this is not everyday occurrence, but as the former person spoke, I think it's getting very unfair that inside the prohibition zone, besides having to pay to clean up the water supply, we are also not allowed to build.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Jeff Edwards, and I wanted to speak to the Executive Director's report in a number of capacities. First of all, with regard to the community plan, I think that is a perfect opportunity to discuss a future growth cap for Los Osos, a residential growth cap. As most of you probably know, Title 26 is our residential growth management ordinance, and the county cap is 2.3% in the unincorporated area. But it's up to really individual communities to establish the cap that they are most comfortable with. And I think that not only in the community plan, but also this committee, I think it's important to talk about that percentage cap. And for my part, I think a 1% growth cap is probably right in the ballpark. It would result in 50, 60 homes per year, roughly. And I think that's something that we could sustain over time. The build-out numbers are dropping. There's a lot of discussion in the community plan about that. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. It was mentioned that the Planning Commission may be hearing the community plan in early 2020. I have my concerns about that. I believe it's probably going to be more like June or July of this year that the Planning Commission actually gets it. Next item is conservation. And as you heard, there's no activity on the rebate program. And in fact, right now, conservation in Los Osos is frozen. There's virtually none occurring. And I think that's a problem because, as we know from prior reports, there's a substantial amount of additional conservation that can be achieved, upwards of 20, perhaps 25%. Right now, we're using 1,000 acre-feet for urban uses. That's another 200 to 250 acre-feet per year. That's a lot of water. And I'd like to see our Title 19 program at the county really step into this century and adapt to the opportunities that we have. Currently, that's not the case. Additionally, you heard about the cannabis and particularly the minor use permit application that has been filed and is pending. I will tell you that the proponent of that project had a private sector firm prepare the water analysis. And I would encourage you to review that because I think it's substantially flawed. This body has an interest in this, not only for the particulars of a conservation issue, but the broader policy questions about, do we want agriculture coming in and saving water or conserving water in the urban areas, when really that's something the urban development and urban folks should be doing to expand uses. You heard about accessory dwelling units, and the limitation is the retrofit's not available to the ADUs. Well, it should be. That 2-to-1 ratio, that goes beyond water neutral development. It's water positive. So I think we need to come to the current climate with the water conservation, and I would encourage you to review that cannabis application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Yes.
Good afternoon, Director, Board, and public. For the first speaker, was Mr. Adams or McAdams? Ditto, ditto, ditto. This town has lots of lots that have not been built out. Those of us who own multiple ones would really like to see some housing made available. I've got mine. I got mine, as that song says. There's a lot of young people that would like to have some housing. We've all taken out our lawns substantially, and so there's water available. Your previous reports at this meeting show that the chlorides are being pushed back, and as a past director at a metropolitan sub-agency, I'm pretty familiar with that, and I celebrate that with you. I've seen your well levels go up. I celebrate that with you. It's just time that we do a few things to make some housing. As far as the Habitat Conservation Program, as a past director of the California State Hawking Club, Falconry Club, I found Fish and Wildlife actually fairly responsible and easy to work with. And I don't understand why your Habitat Conservation Program fails. That should be behind us. Those are reasonable people, at least when I was able to work with them in a small capacity. And there is no reason why the shoulder van snail and our Habitat Conservation Program should be difficult, should be approved, or there's something not being submitted accurately or with our full county gusto to try and meet the requirements so we can get an approval. Something's wrong somewhere. I'm only about a 10-year property owner here, but in that time, something's going on with the HCP. So as much as you can encourage the county process, Director Gibson, sir, as much as you can encourage the county process to be successful, let's get that rolling. Let's get some housing units for young people here. Thank you. Excuse me.
Thank you. Any further public comments? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and bring it back Bruce, would you like to?
Yeah, I'll respond on the housing. Everybody wants to see more housing put into this community, our county, and every community in the state of California, and it will come. It all hinges on the Los Osos community plan. And so let me pick it apart just slightly. The ADU ordinance is the second phase of aligning our auxiliary dwelling unit regulations with what the state has told us we need to do. And Mr. McAdam, I think you received a fairly extensive response from my legislative assistant. If you haven't seen it, we'll make sure you get it. So the basic what we know is true, that we can prohibit ADUs in certain communities based on resource constraints, and it has been determined, since we have not finally had the determination on our water basin adequacy for the projected build-out of Los Osos, that we think the prudent thing to do is, for the time being, to prohibit ADUs. It's also a matter of equity, and that is that whereas if a parcel in Los Osos was able to establish a second dwelling unit through retrofit and the use of the existing sewer connection, it might be perceived as inequitable to a completely vacant parcel which cannot establish a new dwelling unit because of the inability to connect to the sewer. That's the proposal that's going to come forward at the January 28th meeting, if I remember correctly, and you're welcome to come and comment on that if you would. I would say that with the passage of with the approval of the Los Osos community plan, we will be revisiting ADUs and see in what extent that they can be permitted in Los Osos. That community plan gets into hearing in February, as far as I can tell, at the Planning Commission. It should be in front of the board by the middle of the year, and it should be in front of the Coastal Commission by the end of the year. So that's our timing on that. And that's the way that it's going to be moving forward. As to the questions about the Habitat Conservation Plan, that is actually in the final phases of approval. It has been posted in the Federal Register. We have received and closed the comment period. We have prepared responses to the comments, and we're in the process now of working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to do whatever needs to be done, whether it's change the HCP or not change the HCP, process the final paperwork, and get approval of that HCP. We're expecting that to be approved before we get to the Board of Supervisors. It may be that the community HCP has to be part of the community plan, and so but it doesn't necessarily have to be completely done when it gets to the Planning Commission. So we would hope to tie all those things together, including an understanding of the how we wrap the basin capacity and the water supply issues into the community plan, so we can demonstrate to the Coastal Commission that we have a plan that fits together and can sustainably support the building and development numbers that we show in the community plan. So that's this year. I actually made out my list of priorities earlier this morning, and that is at the top of it. So we'll be working that one through.
Okay. All right, Dan, do you have any additional comments?
No, I believe most it was covered.
Okay. All right. Thank you. With that, then we'll move to item 7A, appointment of the BMC officers for calendar year 2020. Dan, would you like to give your recommendation, please?
Yeah, so item 7A, so the staff recommendation is to retain the existing officers for 2020. That was, I believe, the action that was taken at the January 2019 BMC meeting. However, if adjustments are desired to be made by the BMC members, obviously, we can have a discussion around that.
Any questions, comments?
I do. The BMC rules and regulations describe these 4 officer positions in some minor detail. And we have, for instance, my position has been secretary, which presumably is recording secretary, and Director Gibson is the treasurer. And we actually don't participate in these functions. And so in the rules and regulations, we are allowed to appoint the executive director to these positions. Now, I don't have an opinion necessarily about this, other than if I'm going to remain recording secretary, I would expect to actually participate in the development of meeting minutes.
Okay, thank you.
And we can certainly talk about that. I have some thoughts on meeting minutes when we get to the meeting minutes. My only comment is that change is difficult, so I think we ought to stay where we are.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll go to public comment on item 7A. Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back for action.
Move staff's recommendation.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes
No,
unanimous.
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
And by the rules and regulations, do we need a unanimous vote on this? There
No.
are some, okay.
So 3-1 then. Okay, so we'll move to item 7B, the update on the status of the Basin Plan infrastructure projects. So the recommendation is to receive the report and provide input to staff for future action. So Dan?
Correct. So item 7A, update on...
7B.
7B, thank you. I have two project updates, primarily. The first is on the Upper Aquifer Well on 8th Street, and again, this is the project that's tied to the IRWM funding. As I described earlier, I have actually some new information that is updated since what's in this status update. But so based on what I have heard, they're anticipating DWR to award the grant in August 2020, agreements in December 2020, and then execution of the agreements in January 2021. My understanding, though, is that upon award, agencies are eligible to move forward and show costs as match for these grant funding. The other update is on expansion well number 2, the lower aquifer. That project has been bid and the contract's been awarded. The CSD is awaiting a well drilling permit and a DDW permit before moving forward, but those are expected to be obtained soon and move forward in January of 2020. And a slight update for the urban stormwater recovery project. Again, that was approved, but has not been initiated, or that funding has been approved, and we have a proposal to complete that work as item 7E.
Pardon me, as item which?
7E.
Oh, 7E, I'm sorry. I thought you said 70. That's where I was confused.
No, yes. Not that many items on the agenda, thankfully.
Okay. All right. Any questions?
Yes, S&T has a comment regarding the Program B, the third item, the Community Nitrate Removal Facility. And we've made this comment before that right now listed as parties involved include the LOCSD and Golden State Water Company as participants. S&T would like to be included as a participant as involved in this project for both the construction and benefit of that. And if there's a reason why that we can't be added to that, I'd like to have a discussion out in the open here to describe why not.
All right. We'll look to add that to a future agenda or get it resolved prior to that.
Do we need, I mean...
This is part of the agenda.
Yeah. I mean, is there a reason? I would submit that we can direct our staff to include S&T in the discussion.
I don't know if there's a reason. We might want, I don't know.
This is an agendized item on today's agenda.
Okay. Does anybody, Rob, or do you have any I'm not talking behind you, John. Rob.
Which Rob?
Our former executive director may have some background on that. I'm glad you're here, Rob, so you can...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Volunteer today.
You can provide us with historical perspective on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Historically, the expansion wells that were going to be developed for Program B were going to be Golden State and LOCSD upper aquifer wells in the initial discussion, because S&T had sufficient supplies. But I think from a technical perspective, there's no reason why S&T couldn't participate fully in the development of any Program B facilities. Of course, it will need to have means of wheeling that water through to your actual distribution system, but I think it's fine.
Okay. Well, thank you for the historical perspective on that.
Thank you.
And if I...
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I could just make a comment on that. So the nitrate facility that's there, we kind of morphed this into the existing nitrate facility, but then there's also been discussion of expanding our upper aquifer somewhat for new development, really, was really where that water would come from. So just to clarify that that there would need to be a second nitrate facility if that was the case. So really, I don't want to portray an image that this one nitrate facility that Golden State currently owns and operates has intention or was designed or constructed for maybe what it's morphing into today, that that S&T could be a part of that. And like I said, the discussion originally that Mr. Miller put out was that there was we were constructing an interconnection at that time. There was some other things that were happening, and so we included that in the discussion. But before moving forward or any subsequent plans are made to utilize that nitrate, we would have to clearly define the intention of that nitrate facility.
Well, I think adding them as a party involved so they can be involved in those discussions shouldn't be problematic.
No, and that's fine. But
Okay. You just want to give additional background information.
Yeah,
yes.
I think we simply direct staff to do that, please.
And
well, wait first. We have to wait for public comment.
yeah, and just to clarify, there have been no conversations that have taken place.
Well, we've mentioned, S&T has mentioned this at several meetings prior to this, and it's been an oversight perhaps, and I'd just like to see that it gets done. I think it's a simple process just to add S&T there, and then any discussions moving forward concerning that community nitrate removal facility would include S&T.
Right. Okay.
If I could, on that same topic, Mr. Chairman, the Executive Director's report also noted that upcoming in 2020 are going to be some studies that will sort of chart out the future of community nitrate removal. And our Public Works staff noted that it probably would be good to include in those studies feasibility of various sorts of treatment as to, how big does this facility need to be in light of the ability to blend or otherwise deal with the nitrate problem down to acceptable standards. So they wanted me to forward that idea to you as well.
Okay. All right. So we'll go to public comment then on item 7B. Okay. Seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back. So I think Bruce has provided comments for you, and then I think the committee's pretty unanimous in adding S&T to the parties involved for the community nitrate removal facility under Program B. Anything else?
Yeah, could I just make one more comment? As we look at these programs and specifically at the creek discharge and the stormwater recovery, I think that we're adding projects in here and notions. We need to have a discussion, and maybe that takes place at the staff level of outlining a clear roadmap of where we're going and how we're going to deal with these projects as they come down the road. Because from what I recall, the way that they got onto our program list was that the board was going to provide some initial funding to help keep the projects alive, and that would better position the projects for grant funding. But what concerns me is when I see dollar signs under Program U of $582,000, that implies that that's going to be funded through this, the BMC. And so I really that was another thing I asked, that we take that amount off, just because I don't want that perception to be out there. And then the stormwater recovery, that was another one that we did an incremental amount of $15,000, approved it to position us for grant funding. Right now, I have no idea where this is going to go or what kind of legs this is going to create, and I don't want it to be perceived that it's part of this project and agreed upon that we're going to see this all the way to the end, when there is no planning or understanding of what these projects are, and ultimately what are the benefits. I know there is a nexus to the water supply, but what is that benefit, and are these the projects that we all agree to pursue?
Well, I think what we can do is just direct the executive director to do a little more analysis of these Program U2 items there, and then bring them back for future discussion.
I think that would be appropriate. If I could respond on that point, I think that the numbers that are appropriate to put in there are the numbers that we budget. Right. And if you look at the way it's listed, maybe the issue with the finances under Program U on creek discharge would be to reverse the two items there. We can note that $50,000 is budgeted for 2020, and just for our reference, that the whole thing may cost $582. And the other one, I think, is completely clear that we've budgeted $15,000 for the initial study. Once we pass the budget, let these show budget numbers, and expected total costs would be completely appropriate. Yeah. I think that both of these issues, both the S&T's participation in the development of nitrate removal and also some of these financial things, should spur us to seriously consider a JPA here. I think that is something that we've thought about for a while, and as we get into the budget, we'll see that we're being proposed to do it. I think we're getting to the point where we need to take some serious steps here, and pro and con on the JPA I get, but I'm starting to see the pros far outweigh the cons, and I think it's time for us to have a serious discussion of that.
Okay. Well, that's something we can look at for a future agenda, Bruce.
Yeah. If I could just respond back to that real quick. I think, what we need to do, JPA is definitely an avenue that we've talked about and considered. But really understanding what is our role and responsibility as the BMC, and how we formed the BMC and the basin management plan, and those projects that were identified in the plan really is our focus and what brought us here today. If we're going to morph into another area, I mean, that JPA would clarify that, but understanding that now we're stepping into a completely different role than what we intended on coming down this road.
Right. Well, I bring it up in reference to your idea of needing a roadmap, needing to get serious about what we do going forward. We need a mechanism to do that. In my mind, there are two choices. One would be a JPA, and the other would be a robust operating agreement among the four parties, with understandings of how ownership and sharing of resources is, and we could go either way. But I think we've got to go one of those two ways.
Well, we'll agendize that for a future meeting.
Just one more comment on that, if I could. And I agree with that. And one of the things that we look at what are the milestones that we've completed since we've started, and I think we have completed. We just heard about moving forward with the NCSD well. That's another huge step financially and just project wise. Right. We look at some of the other wells that Golden State, the nitrate, we can keep moving that. So I think our initial feedback was positive response of the activities that we're taking are positive, and we're seeing that, but we need a little more time to confirm that. So, I jump back to my original thing about rushing into a JPA. Is that really necessary at this juncture right now? We have activities that are taking place. We have additional monitoring, which is a key component of the BMC, really. That was one of our fundamental, was to monitor and observe what was happening. these types of changes, they don't happen overnight. And I know it's not moving fast enough for some other,
And in particular, the county, because of our land use authority. So that's what, as you can well imagine, what motivates me is representing this community. We want to see the new community plan in place. That's going to depend in very large part on our work here, and so that's. I'm going to be a thorn about that, because about our ability to move forward as a BMC or whatever we get. But I appreciate the chair's interest in seeing this agendized, and we should have a robust discussion about both of those paths forward in trying to get the job done here.
Okay, thank you. So no actions required on this particular item. I think you've got some direction. And then I'll get together with you and we'll talk about when to agendize these future items.
Could we talk about what that direction is? That I'm not sure I understand what the direction is that staff got.
Well, on program,
on the nitrate removal, it is.
We're going to add S&T, and then on program U, we're going to look at that the fourth column, which is the capital cost column.
And we're going to agendize the discussion of JPA or operating agreement
sometime at a future meeting.
Hopefully sooner rather than later. Again, I would hope to see more than just the concept of it.
Right. First, I'll work with Dan and we'll look at that.
Specifically about that fourth column in the program U that you discussed, I think the Director Gibson mentioned that he thought those two costs should be reversed so that the budgeted amount appears first, but the $582,000 estimated complete cost should be still listed, but second, listed after that. Is that correct?
Yes. All right, so we'll move on to 7C, the adoption of the Basin Management Committee annual budget. Recommendation is in detail, so you can go through it on this one.
Yes. So the staff recommendation for item 7C, the 2020 BMC annual budget, is to review the provided budget alternatives, adopt budget items 1 through 6 for a cost of $170,500, and provide input on the remaining items for subsequent adoption at the March 2020 BMC meeting. And so for this item, I prepared a short PowerPoint presentation to walk through the different considerations. There's quite a bit included in the staff report, and so I can walk through that now. So again, recommendation: review the budget, adopt items 1 through 6. Those are critical items for administering the BMC and the preparation of the annual report and ongoing groundwater monitoring. And then provide input to the executive director on direction for how we want to bring the budget back to this committee for approval in March. So included in the agenda packet are really two different budget options, and I described them as: one, the no WRFP grant. I like acronyms, but I'll explain this one. So, no water recycling funding program grant. So this is sort of what I would consider sort of more of a base budget. It includes items 1 through 6, which I would consider essential for the administration of the BMC, and then it includes a number of additional budget items that were proposed at the last BMC meeting in the draft proposed budget, including the creek recharge and replenishment study, the urban stormwater recovery project, and then which we've discussed at this meeting, and then one that hasn't come up but I think is critical to some of the discussion that the board had around the JPA and other organizational government structures, and that's the funding and organizational studies. And so that proposed budget has a total of $294,500 and a breakdown as shown by the BMC cost share. And just that proposed budget is approximately 16% lower than the 2019 BMC budget, primarily because not included in the 2020 budget is the cost for the lupine or requested by the sea monitoring well construction. So the alternative budget incorporates an initiative that was brought up at the last BMC meeting, and that is the potential pursuit of a water recycling funding program grant to support the activities of the BMC and improve our understanding of the groundwater basin. So some details around that grant opportunity. It can provide up to $150,000 in grant funding. However, it does require a 50% local match. And so a sort of proposed outline for what that local match could be is included in the staff report. And it includes a number of previously budgeted and approved line items that the BMC has taken initiative on, primarily being the creek discharge and replenishment studies that 50K, or really is 45 that hasn't been spent. That could be shown as match. Additionally, we believe the urban stormwater recovery perched water project, which we'll talk about in item 7E, could be shown as match. And then also in-kind staff support services from the BMC parties can be documented and is shown as match to help meet the match requirement for the grant. One of the constraints, however, is that match funds are only eligible if they occur after the funding program eligible start date. And that start date is after we've submitted an application and that application has been, I would say, informally approved by the funding agency. So that is a date that is yet to happen. So if we want those costs from those previously approved items to count, we need to wait until we've pursued and been approved for the grant. This grant program has a continuous application period, and based on discussions with these funding agencies, they have a significant bucket of money that they are looking to distribute to agencies to complete studies such as what was being proposed here in Los Osos. And there are a number of communities here in San Luis Obispo County on the Central Coast that have pursued, obtained, and completed similar studies with grant funding from this program. This program is only available to public agencies, so likely either the CSD or the county would need to be the lead agency, and cost-sharing agreements established with the other BMC parties would need to be established. And this program really, it provides an opportunity to leverage existing budgeted items to bring in external funding and reduce the impact to the community. And so this is just a summary of what a budget could potentially look like if we incorporated a water recycling funding program grant. I just have the totals and the cost splits here in the PowerPoint, but in the agenda packet we have the detailed tables. What is envisioned, or at least as proposed, as for inclusion in the grant application would be completion or really transforming the existing groundwater model, which for the Los Osos Basin, which is a steady state model, to a transient model. And that would allow the Basin Management Committee and its hydrogeologists to do more in-depth analysis of predictive for future what-if scenarios, and speaking to a little bit of the discussion earlier about benefits of one project versus another, a transient groundwater model would be an excellent tool to identify the benefits of the creek discharge project and or compare that to the perched stormwater project. And so it would be an expanded tool set to help develop a work plan and an implementation plan to implement the basin plan and provide sustainability of the water supply here in Los Osos. So a large chunk of the grant is proposed for that conversion. We've previously, the BMC received an estimate, I think that's $120,000 for that component. After the conversion, then ideally we would have grant funding available to do those scenarios as described, to help analyze the different opportunities to improve basin sustainability through various projects that are outlined in the basin plan, or potentially others. In reference to the in-kind services, one potential opportunity would be to have technical advisors staff representatives from the existing agencies participate in the transient model conversion and the model scenario analysis, provide technical guidance, and really leverage the local knowledge that the BMC agencies staff have available to them. And then another component, there's sort of grant administration, and also there's specific requirements for the grant, the development of a final report that would be required. So those are the sort of additional items that are included in the other budget alternative that's proposed in the staff report. And we can discuss those in more detail if the BMC desires. And so, again, just looking for input on the additionally proposed items, however, also recommending approval of budget items 1 through 6 to allow for continued facilitation and time of the BMC and timely development of the annual report.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions before we go to public comments?
So the management of this grant is added to the water recycling funding, the expanded version of this? It's already part of that and adequate?
It is, yeah. And there's still some details to be worked out. I would say that the framework shown in here is sort of a starting point. And, I think discussions would need to be had with the grant applicant agency, because a lot of times nothing's free, so there will be staff time that's required to administer the grant. Now, likely we can count that as match, so there's a benefit there, but there will be additional staff time and administration required.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go to public comment then on the budget, please. Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back.
Mr. Chairman, if I might,
yep.
Let me offer a path forward here. County's supportive, certainly, of pursuing the water recycling WRFP, whatever that is, funding program. We're certainly. I've advocated, and my staff concurs, the importance of having a transient model. It is the state of the art, and we are facing a number of very interesting opportunities here that we will need that for. So we're all for proceeding. What my staff indicated, though, was that a little more discussion on the exact cost share and how those matching funds are allocated and raised, and we don't think that that's a major problem or difficult to resolve. And so what we might propose is the county would certainly support approving items 1 through 7, which includes instead of just 1 through 6, 1 through 7, which includes the grant application efforts funding, and also item 10, which is the funding for organizational studies. We're ready to support those right now, and come back with 8, 9, and 11 at our next meeting after we've had a chance to just work out the details of them. And I'd be happy to make that a motion if any colleagues would like that.
I think that's a great idea, personally.
Is your motion then to include this as a formal agenda item at the next meeting?
The discussion of the remaining items, okay. 8, 9, and 11 at the next meeting, yes.
So you're go ahead.
If I could.
No, I just want to clarify the motion. No.
Yeah. So I think this is where some of the confusion was in the last meeting regarding the transient model. And if we bring that back to the next meeting, that's fine. Maybe it'll have an opportunity that if there is a staff meeting, we can work out and clarify some understanding of those costs. I think, the one I could go with adding item 7 in there. It's an incremental amount, but the 40,000, really not clear understanding on that, and would need to definitely consider that with Golden State before approving that. So wasn't prepared to do that at this time. And so if we could leave that out, I'd be in favor of doing 1 through 7. A little bit more consideration on
8 through 11.
Yeah,
8, 9, 10, and 11, right.
Sure.
Yes, and include a staff meeting to further discuss these in more detail before coming back to the next meeting.
But all 4 of those items, both the grant application and the organizational study.
Yes.
Yeah, so, no, I agree with you that's where I was coming from, too, is I think we should go with 1 through 7 and 8 through 11. I think bring back at their March meeting for further discussion after staff's had an opportunity to weigh in some more detail. Because I think, like Bruce said, the transient model is a big deal, but it's also a costly item. So.
Right. That's a big ticket item that...
So I'd like to ask the chair then, has Bruce's motion been modified then?
It hasn't been seconded yet, so...
Yeah,
I'm happy to modify it to 1 through 7 with 8 through 11 coming back at our next meeting.
I'd like to make one comment about that. I'm ready to support that for S&T Mutual Water Company on the condition that S&T is no longer excluded from staff meetings of the BMC. That if we're going to discuss some of this at staff meetings, S&T must have representation at these staff meetings. That must stop.
That's certainly acceptable to the county. And
do you have staff?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't go because then we can't get into a Brown Act violation.
Well, I think that's something up for discussion. You're an expert.
I don't go, and you don't go.
I don't go.
Well, and so then if it's only Charlie acting as technical staff,
if you're the only
fine.
staff member, the only board member, then it's fine.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Thank you.
Well,
if there's other discussions about methods of doing this if that makes you uncomfortable, let's discuss it openly.
If you're not, you haven't been participating, Mark.
No, I haven't been.
And nor has Marshall, nor have I. So,
but Mark wants to discuss this a little. I can tell.
Well, I just think being a part of that as a board member is seems to me. I guess I would have to think about it a little bit more, but it's definitely a optimal position. I might want to be a part of that staff discussion and have purview to those conversations, because that's really where the rubber hits the road. So allowing Charlie that because of how he's structured, I don't know if that is the right thing to do or not. I just an initial reaction that it's...
So I would submit by our bylaws, given S&T's low voting percentage, if it's S&T and one other board member or one other committee member, we haven't hit the 50% voting threshold. So, so I don't, unless the attorneys get gray hair over that. Oh.
Well, but I have some concerns over that because this is something we need to talk about a little more.
We might hear.
Well, no, before we get to that, because I'm not going to agree to this at all.
Okay.
So, I have a problem with it from a policy perspective, because it seems to me if we have a committee member or even 2 committee members in the meeting, that gives them leverage above and beyond the ones that aren't there. So I have a problem with that.
What's your concern, though, about excluding one of the...
No, I'm not saying it shouldn't be excluded.
...from attending? I mean, how do you feel about the equity of excluding one of the 4?
I'm not saying it should be excluded. I'm saying staff should attend, but not a committee member.
So at the last meeting, you mentioned that you did have staff or somebody that could go there.
I mean, you could have Rob Miller, who's your engineer, attend, but I just have a problem with a board member attending.
Right.
Well, and so, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to go with however the committee wants to resolve it, with making sure S&T gets representation. But, we operate ad hoc subcommittees of 5-member boards all the time, where we have two members working with technical experts on a variety of issues. So I don't, and again, I'm not going to push this point, I just register the fact that I am sanguine about the the fact that there will not be negative consequences to that, since everything has to come back here, and all three of the larger agencies have their staff representing our interests at the table in these staff meetings anyway. So I don't see the problem, but however my colleagues would like to resolve this, as long as S&T gets to attend, is fine with me.
John, do you want to talk about Brown Act at all? I mean, I don't think it's relevant, but go ahead.
John, County Council, just with respect to Commissioner Gibson's question as to the voting structure constituting what can, if it triggers Brown Act. The Brown Act actually doesn't speak to voting weight. It just talks about members. So whether or not one member has a lower voting weight than another, it still arguably would trigger Brown Act if a majority of the body meets without it being agendized.
Are we a quorum at 2? We're not a quorum.
No, we're a quorum at 3.
4. So 3 would constitute
But
Brown
but
two could attend. Yes, Bruce.
Two
right.
could attend.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve 1 through 7, and then it seems like we have to have further discussion about 8 through 11, how we're going to resolve those items. So can we bifurcate your motion, Bruce, for lack of a better term, and vote on 1 through 7 first,
Sure.
and then have some further discussion on 8 through 11?
Sure.
Okay, I'll second the motion to approve 1 through 7.
I'll second that motion.
I already did. You missed your turn.
Then it just passed.
Okay.
Cool.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about how we're going to proceed forward on 8 through 11. So, I don't know. It just seems to me, from my perspective, that if S&T wants to participate, we're having our staff members there. I mean, they're only a 4% voter, so I think, and it's a much, much smaller entity, obviously, but having Charlie attend may not be a problem. I don't know at this point. I don't know if that's an issue or not, because I have never participated in one of these meetings, so I don't know how they operate or what actually happens in those meetings. So that's my only concern at this point.
Can you imagine your position if none of your staff had ever been invited to these staff meetings, and how you'd feel about it then? You'd really be in the dark about what goes on at the staff.
No, I totally get that. That's why I'm saying I have mixed emotions, because I've never been to one of these meetings, so I don't know what they do.
So I would argue, Mr. Chairman, that to help our smallest member of this committee, I just do not see, persuasive and charismatic as Mr. Cody is, I don't see him brainwashing any of the staff members to the detriment of any of these 3 larger agencies. And since we collectively, the other 3 representatives, have never participated, how about if we give it a try?
I would be open to that.
How about if we do it, let's come back at next meeting, and there really hasn't been any staff meetings, have there?
Yeah, staff's been meeting to try to sort out who's paid for what and how we go forward with some of the joint.
John has another
County
comment.
Council again. One of the things I'd like this committee to avoid is formally creating, that staff body, because it is just a staff communication.
Right.
Once this board formally, creates it or designates it one way or another, to the degree that then you're creating a Brown Act body unintentionally. Right. So, what I would recommend is maybe give direction to your staff as to how you want your staff to operate and to work with one another, but not formally agendize it or take action with this board, with this committee itself.
To set rules for it or any other kinds of stuff. Sure.
And I think that having S&T and Charlie participate in those is important, and we want that to happen. But putting conditions on it or something of that nature was the problem. I guess that's where it kind of rubbed me a little bit wrong. So you're obviously welcome to participate in these. I don't think there's ever been a thought of excluding S&T. It was more of they were they were somewhat just at will kind of a meetings that really weren't a standing.
Well, they're not formal meetings, right?
Right.
They're just communication, staff communication is how I understand it.
Can you describe those conditions that you're uncomfortable
Well,
with?
you were saying to approve the budget.
To have formal meetings, that's what I was
Yeah, you said
uncomfortable with.
that you would approve the budget if you were, S&T would be participating in staff meetings, and that was the part. So let's just, we'll include S&T, let's
In
see
the
how that works
discussions,
out.
right.
If it
And-
doesn't work out at the next meeting, let's have a further discussion on it.
But I think, again, we're not setting up a formal body and we're not setting up a formal meeting structure. All we're saying is that you can participate with staff and our executive director.
And thus, you hear direction to staff by consensus, I think?
I think so.
With reconsideration of 8 through 11.
Yes.
Yes, we'll re-agenda,
So
or not
we'll bring-
re-agenda.
And re-agendize for next meeting.
Yep. Bring those back.
We haven't considered them, Bruce, so I don't think it's reconsideration, but it's a consideration.
Re-agendize it, yeah.
All right. Okay, so we have consensus on that item then. All right, so moving on to 7D, approval of proposals for hydrologic services for calendar year 2020 to be provided by Cleith Harris Geologists.
Yeah, so this is the annual proposal from Cleith Harris Geologist. There's two separate proposals, both associated with the groundwater monitoring and the annual report preparation. The first proposal, budget is also budget item 5, is for the annual seawater intrusion monitoring. There's a budget increase in this year's seawater intrusion monitoring associated with some additional monitoring that the BMC would like to perform, or that Cleith Harris would like to perform. This includes seawater intrusion monitoring at the sandspit wells, and that is scheduled to occur every 5 years, with 2020 being one in that sequence. Additionally, contaminants of emergent concern modeling at FW6. That's a recommendation that came out of the 2018 annual report. And then finally, just the incorporation of the new lupine quested by the sea monitoring well into the ongoing monitoring program. That's why there's an increase there. For the budget item 6, the annual report preparation, there's a slight budget increase there also, and that is to account for the additional work associated with updating the conceptual model, which includes cross-sections, E-log interpretation, and seawater intrusion interpretation from the results of the new lupine quested by the sea monitoring well. And so incorporating the results and the findings from those, the new information that we've obtained through the construction of that well into the 2019 annual report. So staff's recommendation is to approve the proposed scope and fee for the 2020 hydrogeologic services and the two proposals included in the agenda packet.
I have a question about one of the acronyms here. What's a CASGM? CASGM? What is that?
California.
So that's a good question. I do not know the formal definition of
It says
California
Groundwater something monitoring.
It's a state.
Pardon?
Act. Monitoring Act.
It's the statewide groundwater monitoring database. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
So it's a state thing we're required to do. Okay, any questions? Okay, we'll go to public comment on this item, 7D. Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back.
Move staff's recommendation.
I'll second that. You move to accept, is that right?
Staff's recommendation.
I'll second
Yeah.
that.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, we'll move on to 7E. which would be normally our last item, except for we have the minutes to come up after this item. So 7E, approval of the proposal for urban stormwater and groundwater recovery feasibility study to be provided by Cleeth Harris Geologists.
Yes, so item 7E, and we can talk about how to approach this. So the urban stormwater and groundwater recovery feasibility study has been a previously approved budget item for the BMC. It was included in the 2019 budget. It is, however, one of those items that was flagged for subsequent review in the 2020 budget for March, taken up by the BMC. So I guess we could review and potentially approve the proposal pending approval of the budget item, or maybe we could potentially postpone this till March. I don't know what would be the appropriate.
I think we probably should just defer it until we have that item on the agenda. Unless
Our Public Works staff had a number of questions about that, and I think they've communicated the gist of those to you, Dan, and so maybe we could use that time to get those discussed.
Okay. So do we have any public comment on this item? Because we're going to defer it till the March meeting. Okay, seeing none. So I think we're all in consensus to defer this item till the March meeting. Are we in agreement on that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, then we get back to bringing back the minutes. So unfortunately or fortunately, I was not at that meeting, so I can't be involved in any substantive discussions. But Mark, you were the one that pulled the item, so you want to lead off here?
Right. Well, specifically at the board comments, page 2, under the executive director's report, we had a discussion regarding the groundwater modeling, and one of the things that came up was the cost of the groundwater modeling or the contribution by Public Works. So, and it may just be clarification with Director Gibson about what that contribution would be. And so there was a statement that's written in here that it says staff is going to contribute $150,000. But then we continue going further down, and I asked the question to Mr. Miller about what is the cost of a model, and he said it was around 120 to 150. And then we went further down. I don't know who that director is, but it said we would be looking at about a $60,000 in grant funding, and we would be on the hook for about $75,000. So then when we went to our budget, our proposed budget, there were line items in there that were much different than this. So it kind of got me in a circle.
So I've got a thought on that. So I think part of this is simply the effort to transcribe to transcribe a conversation. And in what we've just discussed with these budget things, and in particular bringing this back, if you look at the budget for the entirety of the transient model and getting it fully implemented, it's nearly $300,000. And so the comment was that we could get a grant for up to half of that, which is about the $150,000. The response from Rob Miller, I interpret that the transient model would be $120,000 to $150,000. Is that's the cost of the model. But if you look in the details of the budget there's more to it, getting that up and getting it integrated into our deal. So I understand the confusion here.
Okay.
I would like to suggest to this committee that confusion can be ameliorated in the future if we go to action minutes in the efforts to transcribe our conversation, which is not necessary because the formal record of our meetings is the video that we do record at this point. I think we could have avoided that misunderstanding if we go to action minutes. It would also take a load off our administrative staff to prepare these voluminous minutes. We had this conversation as we started up the BMC, and to be honest, I don't frankly see the value of this level of detail. If we come to an agreement or if we make specific direction to staff, those would be recorded as part of the action. But the back and forth, I don't think needs to be part of this at this point.
Okay, yeah, Charlie.
I'm not sure I understand, and could you describe the difference between the type of minutes we have now and action?
Yeah,
minutes?
action minutes would be that, in the executive director presented his executive director's report. And we have the staff report that's published as part of the agenda. We have the video of the executive director presenting. When people comment, we can say individuals A, B, and C by name have commented on it. In the terms of the executive director's report, no action was taken. For the budget item, the budget item was presented by the executive director. Director so-and-so, moved that a piece of it be approved, seconded by so-and-so and approved. And again, individuals who comment on it would be listed by name. The details of that reside with the video recording. And it's the method that the Board of Supervisors uses and virtually, I think, every public agency. So, as we look forward, and we can agendize a conversation about that in the next executive director's report. But it's my suggestion that we go to that, and that actually clarifies things better than what we've got going here.
Mark, do you have anything else before we go to public comment?
No, that was the main point.
Okay, so we'll go to public comment on this item.
Lindy, I wonder if you couldn't just put a note in the minutes that says, for any confusion, refer to action, or the action minutes.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, bring it back.
You ready to move approval of the minutes?
Yes.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion for approval of the minutes as submitted. I believe that one place where it says just director, I think that should be Director Zimmer. Just reading it, it seems like that was
I thought it was Director Gibson.
No, because it was a response.
He talks a lot.
It was
and often doesn't make a lot of sense. So.
You said before Rob, and you said then Rob, and then I assumed it was you, but I wasn't there.
Some director.
Yeah. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain since I was not at the meeting, so passes 3 to 1 abstention. Okay, so we now go to our last item on the agenda, which is item 8, which is public comment for items not appearing on the agenda. Oh. All right, seeing none. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Gary Walker, and I'm a resident of Los Osos. A question came up in the agenda, but it's different than the agenda, and that is that previous groundwater report, the one that you're talking about spending $15,000, is the one from last year available? And where might I find it?
We'll respond to that after you're done.
We'll get started.
Further public comment, please.
Yes, Barry Brannon, ranch in Los Osos Valley. In your item for a Cleith Harris report, your item proposal for their budget, there's no elaboration on the urban stormwater recovery ideas, and I wonder if it's possible to find out. It's in your item 7E that you decided to defer. Is there any way we can get more information on the scope of work that Cleith Harris is planning? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Lindy?
Lindy Owen, I just wanted to go back to my simplistic comment of I think we have to remember that this is a basin, that if we can stop seawater intrusion, then we stop seawater intrusion. We preserve that for the future if we are ever able to push back out. It doesn't mean that we have more water when we stop seawater intrusion. So when we go to the other side of the basin and pump, it doesn't mean that there's more water. It just means we're slower at pulling the ocean in. We're still removing water from a finite basin. And I throw back into that, the monitoring of private wells will never tell us how much water we have in our basin. We'll never know until those are monitored. And I would encourage the county to move forward with that. It is happening in other areas where this basin management is, that's a very important part of knowing how much water you have. Mr. Gibson wants to speed up our basin management direction so that we can be ready when the community development plan comes, our community plan comes forward. The county wants to build houses here. The county makes money off houses. A lot of people would like to build houses too, but the water basin is finite, and I appreciate that we're working in a manner to be responsible with it. But I still think the wells, monitoring those wells is something really important, and I would support that be looked at as cost sharing so that the well owner doesn't have to pay it. It shouldn't be their responsibility unless that's their contribution to helping monitor and control the quality and quantity of water we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Rick Heath. With complete respect to previous speakers, this basin is in delightful recovery, and it's time to get some housing stock going. And if you want private well monitoring, I've got several. I'm delighted to pay for that. We're doing great things here. People have taken out, they've conserved. It's fabulous. It's time we use this basin and its water, which is in marvelous recovery, for some more housing stock for the young people who don't have the opportunities that some of us had. I'm sorry, I just can't underscore that enough, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any further? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment and bring it back. I know it's not agendized, but I'm going to let you guys, any closing comments by you guys? Okay, with that then we'll adjourn till our March meeting. I don't know what the date is because I don't have my calendar in front of me, but somebody want to give me the date in March? March